Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
What we're going to talk about, super important for moms, women who are trying to juggle everything all at once. You're taking your kids here, there. It's just not even a moment to breathe. And then it's time to go to bed and go to work and rinse and repeat. And now you're stressed out, maybe chronically stressed out. For that, we have some help. And she is the founding CEO of the Health Education Resources Network. Dr. Melissa Oden joins us again on the program. How are you doing, Melissa?
I'm doing great. It's so nice to be back with you.
I'm so glad we're talking about this. And I have a friend who I just described her. And yesterday, and this is just another day, but yesterday she dropped off her son one place, I think it was lacrosse, then over to football practice. Then she picked up the other son. And while the other one was at that one game, then drove far away, like out east, like it's a long drive to pick up a uniform, then drove back, picked up the son, then went to her parents' house to birthday dinner or something. It's like I get stressed out even texting or talking to her about it.
Yes.
I don't know how that doesn't take its effect on women at some point. And many moms are going through that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And not just moms, women in general are, I am not a mom, and yet I find myself in midlife, dealing with those same things. And I can't honestly imagine having to throw a couple of teenagers in the mix, or even little ones. Honestly, I'm too old to have little ones on, but I can't imagine. I cannot imagine throwing a couple of teenagers into the mix there. That is, it's challenging. It's challenging for sure.
She's 48 and has a 6 and 10-year-old and a single mom.
Oh my,
she does a great job. She really is. And sometimes I even want to say to her, we all love our kids, but it's sometimes you just tap the brakes and you need a little me time. It's okay to say no sometimes, right?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I believe we talked about this last time we were together, but I will say it again. I was on a flight last week and Tuesday and Saturday going and coming from El Paso for a conference. And they said, both flights, if that oxygen mask drops down, you put that on you first before you try to help anybody else. And there is a reason why they say that, because you cannot give from an empty cup. And so when you're not taking the time to refill, and identify those stress triggers and figure out how to deal with that, then you are no good to anyone at some point, right? I mean, you can do that for a little while, and kudos to those women who have to do it all the time, but at some point it's going to catch up with you, and you need to figure out how you're going to handle that.
How do you head that off of the past? Now you've got, pick any example, driving here, I call it dad or mom Uber, and so much going on. What's your suggestion in that situation where your kids are doing stuff and you want to encourage them to do things, which is great, but with that comes your work.
Yeah. Okay. So just totally transparent. I don't have kids, but I do have a brother who's got 5. I kind of know how this goes. Right. And I also have friends who have kids, so I get it. It's very difficult. But I think what has happened is we've become very kid-centric in this culture. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't want anyone to hear me say that. But what I think happens is that parents get in this mode of, we want the best for them. We want them, and it gets into this circle, this cycle, and we forget to have boundaries. And, I know I sit at a football game every Friday night during the fall. I've got parents all around me who've got kids in band, cheerleading, drill team, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, no wonder you're tired. Why can't you just pick one? Just pick one to do. So I think setting really good boundaries is a great start to that. Do kids really need to do all of that? I'm going to pause it, say no. Again, it's really up to each family how they handle that. But when you start crossing boundaries in any area of your life, then you're going to start looking at challenges like that. And eventually you're probably going to burn your adrenals out, which I do believe we talked about last time as well, which is a huge problem. It's a huge problem for our culture right now. A lot of us are walking around with burned out adrenals, and we cannot respond to anything because we've responded to everything.
Let's go back to the beginning point where this all begins psychologically as parents. Why do we push that on our kids? Why do we follow through with it? Why do we do 5 different activities and always running here left and right? Is it out of guilt?
It could be, but what I have noticed the most is a desire to live vicariously a life that you didn't get to live through your own kids, right? So if you didn't get to do those things, if you wanted to do those things, but for whatever reason you weren't able to, you put your kids in there so that you can be involved and kind of live that life vicariously through them. So that's the number one thing that I find. But I think number two is just an unrealistic perceived competition, if you will, between this parent and that. It's kind of like the battle of the Joneses on steroids.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's competition, and it's a perceived game of competition that is really destructive. It can be your finances, it can be the car you drive, it can be the house you live in, it can be the activities your kids are in. It can be a variety of, it could be the parties that you throw, right? It could be whatever food you have. Have you ever seen the numbers of kids' parties right now I just had a birthday cake at mine when I was little. I didn't have a pony or a bounce house or anything like that. And again, I'm not saying those things are bad. I'm just making a comparison to where we've been and where we are. And, ask yourself, are those things really necessary, or are they adding stress to my life that I really could do without? And do my kids really need that?
And I guess, like you just said, it goes back to your childhood in that you didn't, let's say you grew up poor and maybe a single parent, and you just didn't have that opportunity to have those parties and the pony and all of that and all of the activities. So now you're making up for it. So I totally see your point there.
Yeah. And honestly, parents, just a quick reminder, all your kids really want and need when it comes right down to it is you and your time. I do remember a time in my own life. Both of my parents finished college when I was little. My dad finished when I was 5, and my mom finished when I was 11. And I don't remember so much my dad's. I do remember his graduation, but I don't remember his study time. I do remember my mom's because I was old enough to remember that. And I will tell you, I'm sitting here today because I saw her do that. I saw that she had a value on education, but I will also tell you that my brother and I never felt neglected. We never felt like we were going without. I don't know how she did it, and asking her today about it, I don't know that she can really explain it either. But she did what she had to do, and then she made sure that she made time for us. We didn't get to go on all the fancy trips or anything like that, but they made sure we got to go to Six Flags during the summer. Just the little things. But I remember the time that they spent with us. It wasn't the money, and it wasn't the places we went because we didn't really get to go anywhere. But even if it had been, I just remember the time that she spent with us. And so just remember that you're modeling for your kids what your values are, whether you know it or not. And so I tell you, I'm sitting here today because both of my parents valued higher education for one thing, but they also spent time with me and my brother. And that's what I remember the most.
Interesting you say that, and I did it, and I'm sure a lot of us, as you're speaking, are getting that picture when we were kids. And my mom was a single mom. It was challenging. I never felt neglected. She was always right there, and I can remember those special times. She was a little overprotective. I'm going to say that, and I was, with my youngest is 14. But I realized that I wish I knew that. I wish I picked up on that sooner. But we're modeling our kids for when they raise their kids, and sometimes we forget about that. It's generational. Maybe my mom went through the same thing. Maybe my dad too when they were kids.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I taught in the classroom at the college level for 10 years before I stepped out and began to run this business full time. And I would have all different ages of students, especially at the graduate level. And, I had a lot of moms in my classrooms who would come up to me and say, I just don't know if I can do this. And I would look them straight in the eye and I would say, you have to do this. Your children, they're watching you. And if you value this, then you have to show them what it's like to go through and complete this goal for yourself. This isn't just about you. This is about everyone else around you. You've got people watching that you don't even know. And I would tell them, I'm not telling you that to stress you out. I'm telling you that because you're being an excellent example, and your kids are not going to miss the fancy birthday cake that you're not giving them this year. What they're going to miss is, if you don't spend time with them, or if you don't show them that setting a goal and achieving it is worth while.
Yeah.
And it would all, I could see the light bulb go off over their heads most of the time. And they'd be like, okay. And that's really when they would dig in and finish. And that usually happened about halfway through the semester. When everybody starts to get stressed out, I'm like, no, you have to hang in here and do this, because if you want your children to do as good as or better than you, then you have to show them the way.
Yeah.
You can't just tell them.
Yeah. There's a lesson in everything. And I just got a memory, my daughter, and I'm trying to get her involved in activities, but she was into basketball, joined a league, so did her friends. And I was like, fantastic. And she's like, I don't know if I want to do this. We don't quit. But I had to give her a pass because after going to probably 4 or 5 practices, maybe 2 games, she and her friend were the oldest kids there. You know, and the others were younger. They didn't have enough kids who were older to join the league. And I was like, I gotta give you a pass on that, because I get it. You know, you're playing against kids that are much shorter, much younger, and it's just, you know. So I didn't want to do that, but I had to do that.
Right.
Let's go back to when you were a kid. What was your inspiration, Melissa, to be on the path to earn degrees, to become a doctor, and what you're doing right now?
So honestly, going back to what I just said about my mom, I think that's when that dream was born. This is such a fun story. So both of my parents and I graduated from Texas Wesleyan University here in Fort Worth, Texas. And part of the reason I did that was because clearly, you know, they were there, part of the reason. But my mom used to take afternoon classes so that she could pick me and my brother up from elementary school. She would take us to the campus and put us in an empty classroom across the way from her math classes. She was a math major. I got none of that, by the way. None of that, much to her chagrin. But she would put us in that classroom across the way, and we would do our homework in that empty classroom while she was taking classes across the hall, while she was finishing her bachelor's degree. And I remember trying to teach my brother my English lessons on the blackboard for the day. I vividly remember this. So I was very familiar with that campus. I was very familiar with the college campus culture before I even got to that point. So I'm 8 or 9 or 10 at this point. So she graduates. I remember her graduation day. And when so that was when I was 11. When I turned 26 years old, I set foot back on that campus as a non-traditional student and finished up my last year of college on that campus. And oddly enough, took my only stats class in that program in that same classroom where I was trying to teach.
Oh my gosh. What are the chances of that?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So I get chills just thinking about it, because I mean, what are the odds, right? That would happen in that very same classroom. And so I think that's when that dream really was planted in me. I may not have known it at that point, but going back to college as a non-traditional student, I graduated in 1997 at the age of 27. That just set off this dream in me that more was possible. And so between 97 and 2011, I earned 3 more college degrees, 2 master's and a doctorate, including that bachelor's, so total of 4.
Wow.
And I really, I really just kind of found my way through higher education. And I knew it was the right thing because I never had any struggles at all. My financial aid always came through on time. I could pretty much always get into the classes I wanted. So I knew I was on the right path. And so I owe it to my parents, especially my mom, for really literally putting us in that place where we could see what was possible, even though at 11, I didn't really know that that's what was going on. And maybe she didn't know that either, to be honest, but it happened. And so, you know, not only do you need to be intentional, but you need to know that the unintentional stuff is making an impact as well.
Didn't something spark in you when you were watching a TV show back in the day?
General Hospital. Yeah. I wanted to be a nurse. I started watching General Hospital when I was probably too young to be watching soap operas, but at any rate, all my friends were doing it. So, you know, you got to do it, right? And I probably wanted to become a nurse because I just was in love with Noah Drake, AKA Rick Springfield, right?
Yes.
So I started volunteering at my local hospital when I was 14 with my best friend. Of course, we had to do everything together. And, that really turned into kind of a love for the medical profession, and ended up meeting the social worker there at that hospital. And her name was Clara Smith. And to this day, I don't know where she is, unfortunately, but she was my mentor. from the time I was a teenager until the time I went back when I was an undergrad at 21. And she was my field instructor. And so I got to work with her at that hospital while I was working on my bachelor's degree. And then when I finished my master's degree in 2001, I became the social worker at that hospital. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah.
I believe there are no coincidences.
No.
All of that happened for a reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, she was still working at that hospital when I came to work there. She was in the outpatient rehab department, and I was on the med surg floor and working ER. So we got to work together as colleagues, which was so much fun. It was like one of those full circle moments that just kind of takes you by surprise sometimes, but it was really special.
Love it. And by the way, when you mentioned Noah Drake and General Hospital, my first girlfriend was just like you. And I'm talking, I was like 18 at the time. And after school, I would go to her house and, we'd hang out, and right at 3 o'clock, got to watch TV. And I was like, Noah Drake, he's taking all my thunder.
Yeah. Well, Noah Drake at 70 something still looks pretty darn good. That's all I'm going to say.
All right. I have to go with that.
Okay.
And he still tours. He's Rick Springfield, still on tour.
He never stops. He never stops. Shout out to Rick if he's watching.
Yeah, and a good guy. I've talked to him before. Like, super good guy, very grounded. But let's talk about, Melissa, how you help women who are, and we talked about what we identified as chronic stress syndrome last time we got together, which I didn't even know that existed. But women that are going through things, or are trying to navigate life, and it just, the plate is stacked too high. How do you work with them?
So it's difficult a lot of times because the ball is so wound up. It's really hard to figure out where to get started sometimes. But actually, I have created a course called Women and Stress: Reclaiming Your Life. That's going to be rolling out at the end of November.
Wow.
And going to have an informational webinar about that on November 2nd. We can talk about that in a minute. But basically, I try to get them back down to a place where they can just do some self-evaluation. And then we just kind of build on that self-evaluation. And the course takes them through what the female stress syndrome looks like and how to identify it within themselves. And then really some very practical steps on how to start moving away from that. And I always emphasize this is a process. It is not going to happen overnight. And some of the physical symptoms that they feel are probably going to linger for a little bit. But really, if we can get up here and change their minds and change their paradigm, that's when all that physical stuff and all of the rest of the stuff kind of starts to fall in place. That's the hardest part to work with. I can help them deal with the physical stuff all day long, but that's not going to change until you start to change your mind. And that's where the hard work really begins. And I just really try to hang in there with them and hold their hands through that, because it's hard. I'm not going to lie, it's hard. But when you have a coach that's willing to do that and who's been there, done that, maybe very recently, maybe as of a couple weeks ago, because sometimes for some of us, it just keeps coming back around, right? It makes it a lot easier when you have somebody that's willing to walk with you through that journey.
Can you give one example when we talk about changing the mindset to release some of the physical challenges that come up from that? What would be one suggestion? What would be one situation in working with that?
So one of the first things that we do in the course, and I'll just kind of give you a really high level overview, is that we talk about your values, what you value the most in your life, and then why are you here? We really do a deep dive into your personal mission and why you are on this planet, because I firmly believe, just like there are no coincidences, that you are not an accident. There is a reason why you are here. You are here because you have a mission to fulfill. And I think sometimes people just lose sight of that with all of the junk that we have to deal with in this world. I think people forget that we're here on a mission. And so I really try to help them figure out, why are you here? And what is it on your life that you need to walk out? What have you been called to do in this world? Because I believe everybody has a gift that they've been given.
Yep.
And if you've not ever heard Les Brown talk about that, you've missed it, because he's one of my huge inspirations. I don't know if you've ever gotten to talk to him or not, but he is phenomenal at really getting this message across, that you have a gift inside of you that needs to come out. And I really am just terrified of dying and not getting that gift out and leaving that legacy. And so I work every day to make sure that I am walking in that calling that's on my life to be able to do that. And so to be able to help other women to do that, I think is very liberating. A lot of that stress comes because we're not living what we say we believe. So if we can connect those two things, that starts to eliminate a lot of stress.
Wow. That is so powerful. And it's talk about misalignment where, your heart says one thing, your mind says another thing, and they're conflicting with each other. And until you get them in sync, i.e. finding what your life purpose is, that passion, you're going to be struggling. You're going to be struggling all the time.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, I've had a lot of students come to me, and especially when I was teaching the social work program, I had a lot of those students come to me and say, you know what, my parents wanted me to be a doctor or an attorney. I didn't want to do that. This is what I want to do because I want to help it. And it's so cliche, but I don't know how else to say it. There are just those of us who are on the planet who want to help people. I don't know how else to say that.
It is that you have a passion.
Yeah. Yes. And so, and I know it's super cliche, but that's just how it is. And so, so my job is to help people do whatever it is they feel like they're called to do. But to get over that guilt of, saying that, my parents or my family wanted me to do this, but this is what's in my heart to do. Girl, I say go for it, right? I mean, nobody is walking out your life, and nobody is paying your bills but you. Absolutely. So if you can figure out how to pay your bills with your passion, then why would you not do that?
What a win. What a win.
It's a win-win because disease, I mean, if you look at the word disease, it means dis-ease in the body. And if you start looking at the psychological components of dis-ease, that's when you start experiencing those physical symptoms. And so there's a part of that course that we look at those physical symptoms and the psychological pieces of what's causing that. And I really try to give women a good foundation to look at an assessment, to look at what they're thinking and how it's being interpreted through their brain and into their body and what it is that they're feeling. So there is a definite connection there.
Without a doubt. And it's been proven scientifically, the connection here to here to here. And, and I love your separation of the word disease. And also with that, I think it was Audrey Hepburn that said, impossible. You think, I can't do that. I'm never going to be able to do that. I want to follow that path, my passion. Impossible. No, I'm
possible. Yeah.
Right there in front of
you.
So
powerful. So that's a really great example of, right, change your thinking, change your life. And I'm sorry, I can't quote the person who came up with that. It wasn't me. change your thinking, change your life is really true. If you just take off the glasses that you're wearing and put on different ones, that's really all it takes. And I don't necessarily mean physically, although think about, when we get new frames and new glasses, how excited we are. And we think we see the world differently, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was just looking at some new frames last night and I was getting very excited about that. But
so was I.
Were you?
I'm not kidding. And these are actually old glasses that I've never worn before. This is the first day. I'm like, I don't know, put them on. They're kind of big, but you know what? I can see. So.
I only wear mine at night when I have to take out my contacts. So
I don't even need them so much. I can see without them, but less fatigue. But we're digressing here.
Right? Yeah. No. Anyway,
I want to share with you just real quick because you brought back a memory for me in terms of what your passions are and what maybe your life purpose is. So real quick, and sometimes you don't realize it. For decades, I worked in radio and I loved helping people and connecting with people. I got out of radio. It was just, mutual parting after like 2.5 decades at this one radio station. And I was like, I really want to connect with the community. I want to do something like that. So I started looking for jobs like external director of something at, public affairs at a hospital and all those kind of things. Wasn't really panning out. And then somebody said, hello, you were doing that all along when you were doing radio. So I went back to it and I've been doing that now for decades. And here I am doing this and spreading the word and trying to help people. But sometimes you never realize it.
I love that so much. And I will tell you, because my business deals in two separate areas, I've been thinking a lot lately about what is my legacy? What is it that I really do well? And when you really become cognizant of that, it changes everything. It changes what you say yes to, and it changes what you say no to.
Yep.
And I find it a struggle to not put myself in a box. And I'm saying that because I know there are a lot of women out there and a lot of people. Let's forget about just the women for a minute and just talk about people in general. I think there are a lot of people who put themselves in a box like I've been trying to do. What is it that I do well? It's important that you know that, but it's also important to know that the work that you've been called to do may not be in a box. That's how our minds work. We want everything, or at least mine, we want everything in a box. We want everything, in a nice, neat place. And I think a lot of times you can't do that, right? There's a thing called serendipity and I talk to my students about this all the time. You think you want to do one thing in public health and or social work, but I'm telling you, if you keep your mind open and if you take the possibilities that come to you, take those opportunities and run with them, you will find yourself in the right place. There's no way you're not going to find yourself in the right place, because life has this way of putting what I like to call the bumpers in the bowling lane, like for little kids.
Sure.
There's no way you can go off in the gutter, because if you're just even trying just a little bit, those life bumpers are going to come out. And even if you hit one, you're going to get back into the middle of the lane at some point, right?
Yeah.
So the point is just to keep going and to just be sure that you are doing work that excites you and not stressing you out. The minute you realize that you're driving to work crying, you need to get out. Get out.
Yeah, absolutely.
That has not been there, done that more than once. Get out, because it's not serving you and it's not serving that company or agency anymore. So get out. I give you permission today. Get out.
And it's not easy, and change is not easy. And I can remember back when that job I talked about after 2.5 decades, and that was my first big job. I got it at barely 18. When I had to leave that job, it didn't feel right anymore. They were making changes in terms of how they were doing what they were doing. And it was, I remember going to bed, I actually waking up on a Monday morning and said, Wednesday's my last day. And that was the end of it after that long run. And then I continue. But yeah, you're 100% right. If it doesn't feel right, then it's time to pivot. It's time to do some soul searching. It's time to call Melissa if you're stressed out. Because if you are stressed out,
I'll help you.
none of that's going to work. How do we reach you? What's the best way?
drmelissaoden.com, DRMELISSA Oden, ODEN.com. You can go there. I actually have a free resource for women who it's actually a journal that they can download for free. And you will get on my mailing list and you will see all the good stuff that's coming down the pike here very shortly. Or you can email me at melissa@drmelissaoden.com.
Literally 30 seconds. And by the way, I didn't take a break. I told you I wasn't going to take one.
I know.
Because this is more important.
Right.
Before we take that break, you mentioned the journal that's a free resource on your website. Tell me about that, because I don't know if it's journaling or a journal to do that, but tell me more.
Yeah, so it's just a journal to kind of help women. It's at the very beginning of their journey with me, and it gives them an opportunity to write some things down and start to kind of put some things in place and get ready for the next steps.
Love it. Yeah. And love talking with you. Your energy is infectious.
Thank you.
Give us some of that. Pass that over.
Well, here you go.
Okay. I look forward next time we get together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.